Well, good morning, CFA families. Thank you for joining us for week 2 of Kids Connection. And I have Jayla with me today. Sam is in Edmonton, but Jayla has agreed to be with me, so thanks, Jayla, for being here. And we are actually going to dive into a Bible story again today, but before we do, we have a number of items that you're going to need for our lesson today, some supplies to gather. So we thought maybe pausing early and getting all of those things would be best. So you're going to need a stack of paper. It could be scrap paper. We're going to use a bunch of those. Markers or crayons, something to write with, a bowl of water, pepper, and dish soap is what we're going to use today. And don't forget to grab your journal that you would have been using from last week. So pause the video and gather your supplies.
Last week, we talked about how Jesus' power calms our fears. Today, we're going to be talking about worries.
Okay, so Jayla, isn't worries and fears kind of the same thing?
Kind of, but fear is like a physical state and something you feel when you see something that disturbs you or makes you afraid. Worries are just thoughts that you're completely safe, but your head thinks that you're in some sort of danger when you see something or you just think something.
Okay, so when I'm thinking about what if and have all these big scenarios in my mind, but they probably never happen, that would be like a worry, right?
Yeah.
Okay. So with this week's lesson, we did Jesus' power calms our fears. What's our Bible point for this week?
This week's Bible point is Jesus' power calms our worries.
Worries, okay. So right now there are a lot of people that are worried about a lot of things, I think, especially with coronavirus, and just there's so much around that, even in terms of finances, jobs, whether they can go outside and feel safe, all of those things. And so today's lesson is really important for us to remember that not only does Jesus want to take care of our fears, he also wants us to give him our worries and to let him help us with that. So I think we need to do our Bible point one more time.
Yeah,
you ready?
I think so.
Okay. So
Jesus' power calms our worries.
It's awesome. And we're going to explore that more in just a minute. But before we dive into our Bible story today, we want to take a minute to talk about this last week's God sighting. So hopefully you've been watching for God at work all around you this week, and you have some God sightings that you've had. And I actually want to share a God sighting that was a person in my life this past week. And the Bible actually tells us that when we're Christians, that Jesus lives in us, right? And that Jesus can actually shine out of us in our kindness and in our goodness, and actually we can show others. That's why there's a Bible verse that says, let your light shine, right? And there was a person this past week who really showed Jesus in how she interacted with me, and that was actually Pastor Amanda. So last week we had a lot of technical difficulties near the end. We thought we had everything figured out for our session last time, and we hit a wall of technical difficulties, and it was very last minute. And Pastor Amanda helped me so much, and she was so patient and kind in how she helped me deal with the technical side. That was my God sighting for the week. But I know you guys probably have lots of God sightings too. So what we want you to do is we want you to take a minute and in your families to share some of those God sightings with one another. So where have you seen God this week? Providing for you, or being busy, God at work in your world? It could be in a person, it could be in nature, it could be in a lot of different ways. But pause the video and talk about your God sightings. Thank you for sharing in your families those amazing God sightings. And so we're going to talk about a music video as well. What do you do when you're worried is a good question. And one of the songs that talks about what to do is a song that's called Won't Worry About a Thing. Won't Worry About a Thing. And it's a reminder to us of what to do with our worries. And if you search YouTube for Won't Worry About a Thing, You can pull that video up, or if you've subscribed to Life Tree Kids, which we talked about last week, is a free subscription, and I actually have a video showing you how to step-by-step make that subscription available to yourself. You can also scroll through and find that video as well. And so take a moment, pause here, and go and get on your feet and sing along as you sing the song, Won't Worry About a Thing.
What a great song that reminds us, Jesus' power calms our worries. The world seems really worried right now with coronavirus, schools, jobs, and churches shutting down. What are some things you hear people saying or talking about that they're worried about? Now you're going to grab your piece of paper, you're going to write one worry on each piece of paper and then crumple it into a ball because you're going to need it later.
And we're going to take just a minute here for you to pause and actually talk about that with your families. So in your families, talk about what do you usually do when you're worried. We know that when we face worries, a lot of us struggle with what to do with that. So we want you to take a minute and to talk about that in your families. We know there are worries, and we're talking about some of these worries, but what do you usually do when you find yourself worried? There was a guy in the Bible who trusted Jesus, but then he started to worry, and things really did not go well. And so if you want to follow along with this Bible story, it's found in Matthew chapter 14, starting at verse 22 and going to 33. And you see a poster right behind us that tells you a little bit about this Bible story. So like last week, we talked about Jesus being out with his friends in a boat. He was there again. They spent a lot of time. They were fishermen, so they spent a lot of time in a boat. But Jesus' friends were now in the boat, but Jesus wasn't with them. And the boat was rocking, and it was, one of those times where you're out on the sea. And then the winds, like last week's story, the winds started to pick up and really became quite stormy. And the waves got bigger, and they were pretty scared. The wind was howling. And then they looked up, and Jesus' friends saw Jesus walking towards them on the water, which was obviously a miracle. People can't usually walk on water. But Jesus was walking towards them, and they were shocked and surprised. Well, Peter, one of the people in the boat, looked and saw that it was Jesus. And he actually asked Jesus, "Can I come out and walk on water with you?" And Jesus said yes. And so Peter got out of the boat, and he started walking towards Jesus. Now, we're going to act this out a little bit in our families so you can be part of the Bible story. So I want you to take a minute and pick somebody in your family to be Peter. Okay, got it? That person's Peter. And so Peter, you need to stand up, and you're going to look across the room like you're looking to find Jesus, and you're looking to where Jesus is walking on the water towards you. And we're going to get you to take a big step out of the boat, and then take another step, and now you're walking on water. Okay, take one slow step at a time. You're stepping out and standing on the water, taking a step towards Jesus. Make sure you keep your eyes on Jesus as you're walking out on the water. Next step. Now I want everybody else in the family to pick up the crumpled piece of paper, start throwing them at Peter. Now, chances are what's happened in your family there as you're throwing paper at Peter is that Peter's going to be very distracted. These are like the worries. The paper, remember, had the worries on them. So all these worries are being thrown at Peter. And if you've done this in your family and someone else wants to pretend to be Peter, you can pause the video here and try that again with your family. Once Peter took his eyes off of Jesus and paid more attention to the storm that was going on, the wind and the waves, he actually sank like a rock. But Jesus reached down and rescued Peter. As long as Peter kept his eyes on Jesus and he was walking on the water, but as soon as the worry started distracting him, he was in trouble. So this reminds us that it's really important when we do feel worried, when there are things around us that could cause us to be worried and distracted, is that we need to be careful to keep our eyes on Jesus and make sure we pay more attention to Jesus than we do to the worries that are all around us. And so in our families, let's talk for a few minutes about that. So a first question I want you to answer, because you've acted out the story with us, is what happened when you tried, Peter, to walk across the room and the paper kept hitting you? So your person who was Peter can help you answer this. What happened as you tried to walk across the room and then the papers kept hitting you? So pause the video and talk about that. All right, now we have another question for you. Out of all of the things that you could be worried about, what's the one you worry about the most? How is that distracting you from Jesus? So pause the video and talk about, of all the worries that are out there, what's the one that makes you worry the most, and how can that distract you from turning to Jesus? Thanks for sharing those answers. And if your worries sometimes distract you from Jesus, well, you're pretty much just like Peter. But as Peter learned, and as we can learn from this story, that if we keep our eyes focused on Jesus, that he can help us. And that reminds us of our Bible point, right? Jesus' power calms our worries. So Jesus wants us to trust him with our worries. And there's a verse that we want you to learn this week as well. And it's found in 1 Peter 5:7. And it says, give all of your worries and cares to God because he cares for you. And that's a verse that reminds us that when we have worries, which I think all of us in life are going to have worries at one time or another, that we can actually hand those worries over to Jesus. We can keep our eyes focused on him and give him our worries rather than feeling like we have to carry all those worries ourselves. And Jayla, when you were talking about fears and worries and how they are different, I think one of the things for me with worries is sometimes I worry about things that are probably never going to happen. And I get all caught up in worrying about those things. And they're not really part of my life, and I have no control over them anyway, right? It's things that I can't change even by worrying, right? So Jesus doesn't want us being that distracted and just focused on things that are not even going to be real in our lives, that we can't change even if we wanted to. So it doesn't help to worry at all. So he wants us to not be that distracted, but instead keep our eyes on him. So that's something that we can be very thankful for, that as we go through the storms of life, just like Peter was in a storm, we have storms in our lives. And as we walk through those storms, we are not alone because Jesus is with us, and that he is inviting us to keep our eyes on him and trust him with our worries.
Let's try a fun experiment that shows how Jesus' power calms our worries. You'll need these things. You'll need a bowl of water, pepper, and dish soap. Okay, I'll show you how to do it and you'll try it too. See this bowl of water? It's clear. Clean and clear. And then you start to worry about, I don't know, whatever you people worry about. And they kind of remind me of the waves Peter saw. You can try and clean it on your own, but it just sticks to your finger. So instead, wipe your finger off and put some dish soap on it instead. And then stick your finger in.
Wow.
And all your worries go away. This represents you keeping your eye on Jesus.
That's pretty awesome. Yeah, so all of those worries, they just seem to disappear, or at least be moved away, which is pretty awesome. Yeah, so keeping your eyes focused on Jesus is obviously really important. Peter learned that, and this illustrates it as well. Jesus had power over the winds and waves, the storm. We saw that last week. He calmed the storm. This time he wasn't necessarily calming the storm, but he, in the middle of the storm, was with Peter. And as long as Peter kept his eyes focused on Jesus, things were okay. It's when he took his eyes off that there was a problem. So in the midst, even while we have worries, sometimes worries will come, we know that Jesus can help us with that. So we know Jesus' power can calm our worries. Yeah. So in your families, let's pause one more time and let's talk about another question. I want you to think about things that can help you keep your eyes on Jesus during this worrying time. What are some of the things that can help you do that? So pause the video and in your families talk about what are some things that we can do or I can do to keep my eyes on Jesus. So what we're learning today is that Jesus' power calms our worries if we keep our eyes on him. So this is what we're going to do. We're going to keep our eyes on him today by going to prayer. And so in our families, what we're going to do is ask you to hold the hand of a person near you. Take someone's hand, and I want you to pray specifically for them. Pray for one another in your family and ask God to help them keep their eyes on Jesus. So we're going to pray for one another. So pause the video and pray that the people around you would be able to keep their eyes on Jesus. Awesome prayers. And now, while this video is coming to an end, you can be doing other things all week that keep reminding you to keep your eyes focused on Jesus. And one of the ways that we can focus on Jesus is also remembering all the things that we can be thankful for. So hopefully you remembered your thankful journal. And this week, what we want you to do to help continue your thankfulness journal is we want you to start on a new page, put the date on the top, and then draw something that represents Jesus for you. It could be a cross, it could be a big heart, it could be anything else that makes you think of Jesus. And then to remind us to give our worries and cares to God, which is what our verse was this week, we're going to ask you to write on that picture of Jesus, whether it's a heart or a cross or anything else, on top of it, write down your worries, the things that you worry about. And in writing them over top, you're basically symbolically saying, I want to give these things to Jesus and let Jesus help me with those things in my life. So I think Jayla actually did one. So you want to show us, Jayla?
Sure. So I drew a cross and I put all of the things I worry about on the cross and then went over them with marker. So some of them are people's opinions of me because I don't know, I just feel that something that worries me because it's a thought that they can all be bad and that everybody thinks bad things about me. Another worry of mine is getting sick or losing a loved one. Losing a friend is a big one of mine because my friends are like family to me. Mm-hmm. And then my other one is dying. Dying can be a fear and a worry at the same time because if it starts in your thoughts, it can be a worry, but you can also be afraid of dying because it can also be a feeling.
Yeah, that's a good point. They are linked often, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and Jayla had also written the memory verse at the bottom, just again to remind ourselves that we need to give those worries and cares to God. And because he cares for us, we know we can trust him. He's trustworthy. And so we want you to keep adding to your journal into your thankfulness journal with a picture, like we said, but also God sightings. So as you continue to watch for God sightings all week, you can draw them in your journal. But all week we want you to be taking the time to do other activities that remind you of our Bible points. So one of those is a coloring sheet, and all these are on our website. The coloring sheet will show you the story of Peter walking on the water with Jesus, and their memory verses at the bottom. We also have a crossword, and I personally like crossword puzzles, and we have two levels, one that has the words provided for maybe the younger grades, and then one without the words for the challenge for elementary students to try to do that without the words. And we also have a craft idea, so the instructions for the craft idea will be on the website, and then it has several templates there that you would cut out. And this is actually really interesting when Jayla, for working with little kids, it actually is a great way to even practice shapes and talk about triangles and even colors, right? So even with really little kids, you can do that. After you've cut everything out and follow the instructions, you're going to make a picture. And you can actually turn it into an interactive picture because you can put Jesus on a straw and he can actually walk on water. So that could be fun to do together and tell the Bible story to one another by doing that. So thank you again, everyone, for joining us for this week, and we will see you next week.